Hello and welcome to A Time for Wellness. I'm your host, Barbara Lucchese, and today I am so super excited. I know I say this every time, but I have just the most amazing friends and guests, and that's why I'm doing this show, because I want you to meet them too. We have Asr Cordes, and he is a documented 12th generation lineage successor of Chen style Tai Chi Quan, under the late Chen family village native, and Chen style Tai Chi Quan 11th generation Grandmaster Chen Jin Kai. He's practiced martial arts since the age of 8 years old and has specialized in Chinese internal martial arts since 1992, with focus on Chen Tai Chi Quan since 1995. He's been a gold medalist on regional, national, and international levels, and has also served as a judge on national and international levels. Asr has taught Chen-style Tai Chi Quan professionally since 1998, which is impossible because he looks like he's only 30 years old. He teaches Chen-style Tai Chi Quan for self-defense, as well as a superb tool for self-care and self-cultivation. Oh my, it's so wonderful to read this bio, because we can be friends, but we never sometimes really know all about our friends. So thank you for joining us here today on the show, Asr.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
Do I call you Sifu?
Please don't.
So Asr, I'm so honored and so glad to call you my dear friend. Tell us, what is Tai Chi and how can it benefit us?
I speak Chinese, so I tend to speak the pronunciations specifically. So it's originally called Tai Chi Chuan.
Tai Chi Chuan.
Tai Chi actually means the supreme ultimate or grand ultimate extreme. It's the combination of yin and yang simultaneously in perfect balance. And that's what it actually means in the name itself. Even though often we hear it pronounced as chi, it doesn't mean the energy chi like we normally think of. That's the main premise in the art, but in the name itself, it's Tai Chi Chuan. So it's supreme, ultimate, extreme boxing. The Chuan part means boxing. So of course it's a Chinese martial art. It was developed about 400 to 500 years ago during the Qing Dynasty, and at that time, it was a synthesis of the top martial arts techniques and strategies, military strategies, combined with the Taoist breathing and internal cultivation methods. So it's a fusion of those elements. And over time, after those warring periods, it became emphasized more for health and wellness. And my particular brand of Tai Chi or style of Tai Chi, Chen style Tai Chi, said to be the oldest style of Tai Chi Chuan, and also it's maintained its martial arts aspect as well as its health and wellness aspect. So today we still have the martial art and the healing aspects as well. Today, more emphasis on the healing aspects, of course. And I guess the main premise is that it's about nurturing and refining your internal energy or your life force, and synchronizing that energy with the energy of the earth and energy of what they call the heavens or the celestial bodies. They all exert electromagnetic force and radiation from the stars and sun, so forth. So all of that impacts us on this planet, as well as the electromagnetic force from the earth and all the plant life and people around us. So those are called the three powers: heaven, earth, and human level. So we are absorbing the energies from those and using that to supplement and augment our own energy that we're born with from our parents.
So what happens then when we're stuck in our house all the time or buildings?
Well, it's a great barrier to absorbing that energy, of course. So it's best to get out in nature so you can get a more direct absorption of those energies. It's natural that when you're out in nature, it happens very naturally. You can feel that if you go hiking or in some very nice natural place with a lot of foliage and your feet can get on the earth. You know, that's very important. In the house, we're cut off. We have semen all around us and we're bombarded by the signals from all of our wireless devices. And so it's good to get out and get away from that and reset everything, get your feet on the earth and rebalance our magnetic poles and so forth. You know, grounding, as they call it. Very important to do that. So it's Got to get out and get some fresh air too, of course, and sunlight. Air, sunlight, and feet on the earth. Those are very important things, I believe.
Absolutely. So then, what about people that are stuck in hospitals? Because in the United States, there's no going outside, right?
It's
So,
interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I noticed in other countries they'll often take people outside to make sure they get some air and some sunlight at certain portions of the day, and that's been known to help with illnesses a lot. And they've actually had a lot of success with doing that, where there wasn't able to be much success by keeping them inside.
wow.
So it's you try to make the best of it. If you're not able to get out, you still can practice indoors and work on what you can indoors. They'll still progress, of course.
Do, do, you, do, you, do you think if someone is like in an inner city and they can't get out or whatever, if they open up their windows and just, or if it's too cold, at least open up the shades so that they can get some sort of internal, external light coming in? Would that be helpful too?
I've practiced in pretty much every setting you can imagine. So like during the inner city, I would go out inside in front of my place. There's a lot of traffic out there, but I'll go in a little space, whatever space I have, I would practice in. And benefit to be gained. Being in the inner city, you want to be careful about excess pollution. So you try things when the traffic is not so heavy and the air is a bit cleaner, maybe earlier or later. But in the end, we make the best out of whatever circumstances we have, and there will be progress. It's good to avoid the pollution, though. You don't want to be breathing in all of that stuff directly. So you try to do things at a time where there's less pollution and a little quieter. I'll do it in the middle of the busiest city on the planet. The best thing is to get it in, because that will make a difference.
So when you say get it in, is it a series of postures? Is it a breathing? Tell us more about the practical, what actually is it?
So Tai Chi Chuan combines breathing and mental focus and movement. And the premise of internal arts is that it's governed by the intent. And so Chinese, they call it Yi. They actually have a saying called Yi, Qi, Li. It means Yi is intent first. That drives the Qi, which is the energy. And that in turn drives the Li, which is the physical force. So that's the order of things that we do in Tai Chi Chuan. It's always generated by the intention or the will. And so we have body postures that we train. They are all martial techniques, but there's a certain structure that we're striving to have. And usually that structure integrates our body from top to bottom, makes us very efficient. And then the mechanics, we use spiral movement. And so that maximizes whatever kind of movement we're doing because things increase as they spiral. And so each posture has specific structural requirements and mechanics. Everything is pretty much generated from the lower abdomen and spins out from there towards the other extremities of the body. So we're always generating movements from our lower abdominal movement. In Chinese, they call it the dantian, which means energy field or lower energy field. That's about 4 fingers below the navel and midway inside the torso. If you were to measure 4 finger widths down that way, right below your navel, that would be the location of the dantian inside the torso. So usually every movement we do is coordinated with breathing, inhalation and exhalation. On every exhalation, the mind focuses to the lower abdomen. So that is our method for collecting energy at the lower abdomen. So that's where our energy resides at, and it supports the whole body. And so we start to build that energy up by focusing there and through the breathing and movements. And naturally, we're going to absorb from our environment while we're doing in that. So even though a person might not be emphasizing combat or anything like that, the martial techniques serve as a catalyst to mobilize the intent, the mechanics, and the structure. So for a martial technique to happen properly, everything has to be correct for it to be efficient. Tai Chi is also considered a higher level of Chinese martial arts. And it's not that easy to develop, but it can be done step by step. That way it's not so complex.
Why is it important? Why is Tai Chi, how could that be helpful to people in this society?
In this society,
what are some benefits?
the main premise of Tai Chi is balance. It's if you ever seen the yin and yang symbol, it's a half yang and half yin with two dots, saying that there's a little bit of yin inside the yang and a little bit of yang inside the yin. That's a depiction of perfect balance. So the Tai Chi practitioner is the actual yin and yang symbol. So you want to strive to achieve that balance. So
that's the E. That's the motivation, is balance.
yes, and when we use the yin and yang, Tai Chi is like the Tai Chi symbols depicting the interplay of yin and yang, and it mirrors how yin and yang happens in nature, how it interplays with one another in nature. So like if you notice, like at the highest point of the day, the darkness begins, and at the highest point of the night, the light begins, just like the Tai Chi symbol. And so your movements will be like that as well. When you get to the very end of a movement, it starts to blend right into the next movement. So you have smooth, continuous movements, and that smooths out the body's energy circulation, blood circulation. The spiral movements, they maximize circulation. So that's how we connect everything together, how we generate power, how we neutralize attacks. But it also promotes the circulation of fluid and energy inside the body as well. And the spiral mechanics, at first, they're very superficial, but later they become deeper and deeper inside the muscles and even in the bones.
Oh, wow.
The very advanced practitioners, you might not see a lot of physical movement, but when you touch them, there's very strong torques and spirals you feel upon contact. So it gets deeper and deeper as you go along. Even as far as nurturing the production of red bone marrow. So our breathing method does that, and the spiral training together does that. So also, Tai Chi is known as meditation in motion. And so there's a saying in Tai Chi, you seek stillness in motion and motion in stillness. So we have parts of the training where you're physically still, and the motion is the internal energy that you're focused on at that time. And then when you're physically moving, we're doing Tai Chi, we have lots of dynamics with the arms and legs and the whole body spiraling and moving. At the same time, we're mentally still. Because of our concentration and governing all these processes, it actually becomes a very concentrated meditation, but we're in movement. So that movement stimulates circulation. So weight-bearing exercise, and they've been known to improve bone density. I've had experiences with students who've increased their bone density after about a year of training.
Really?
The physicians actually gave them an indication that they had increased their bone density by a certain percentage, and the only thing they had added into their regimen was the Tai Chi practice.
Amazing.
You know, so that's been documented in other people's research as well. But I was glad that experience was one of my own students as well.
Wow.
Also, because art is driven by breath control, in Chinese medicine, they say the lungs are related to the emotions. And so by regulating the breath, you can regulate the emotions. If you notice, when you have different emotions, the breathing changes, sometimes more high, sometimes more relaxed, sometimes faster. There's emotions affecting the breath. This time we're using the breath control to affect the emotions. We're not thinking about that, but that's a byproduct of the correct practice.
Have you used that in your life when you've had stressful and impactful life events?
Yes, and I haven't really intentionally did it like that, but I come to know that from experience in training. But I've had one profound experience. I've had a lot of them over my lifetime, and people often have emotional releases during training because we're slowing the breath down, and we're also decreasing the height of the body posture. When you lower your body posture, it brings more pressure into the body. So combined with controlling the breath and lowering the height of the center of gravity, it creates the pressure that tends to open up things inside, especially when you combine with twisting and spiraling the torso, stretching the torso, compressing it. All of that causes release of emotions, toxic buildups. Most of the time it's pretty subtle, but sometimes people have more powerful releases.
Wow.
I used to have one student who would cry often during training, but it was just because of the release. At first they didn't upset.
They didn't understand it. Yeah, in my world, in massage therapy, we call it a healing crisis.
Uh-huh.
So so I would think, because the vagus nerve runs through all that. And
Uh-huh.
I have a term that I call like a discharge. So like when the
Mhm.
gazelle runs away from the lion, right? And it has to have all that fight or flight going on to get out of the situation. But then they
Mhm.
do this sort of discharge and then they
Mhm.
shake it off and then they can go about their day. And it's interesting, right? Because in our world nowadays, we're not doing that kind of discharge. It's like we focus on bodybuilding or eating nutrition, but what
Mhm.
about the emotional charges, like you say, that are stuck inside there? And then all of a sudden we're surprised when we relax and then the discharge comes out, right? Because that's part of that bell curve, right? It's like we have to
Exactly.
go through the discharge to get back to that homeostasis. And that's what you're
Mhm.
seeing sometimes when you're in teaching people.
Yes, and within my own personal practice, once I had an experience many years ago, I was extremely, extremely, extremely upset, and I was in the most probably the most negative mental state you could possibly be in. But I was determined to do my daily practice, and at that time I was training very intensively, and I would train in a park every morning. And I used to run a school at that time, but I would go to the park and train to get in. I immerse myself in a natural environment, and I was doing probably a few hours of training at a time, and I noticed I wasn't going to let anything stop me from practicing because I knew the practice was good. So I went to train, and all my impulses were like, "Let me leave this practice and run and go do something bad to somebody." But I stayed there, kept practicing, and it subsided. And the next thing you know, it subsided more and more and more as I immersed myself in the details of training. It's really focused on the details that occupies the mind, and with the training itself generates the things that change the mental state. So by the time I completed that session, my whole mental attitude and energy was 100% positive, maybe more than 100% positive. And I went into the situation that I was dealing with complete positivity, and everything was magnificent.
Isn't
And
that
that was
amazing? It's amazing, isn't it?
mhm,
Like we
that
don't,
kind of
I don't think we realize how when we have this situation and we don't. It's part of it is the resistance of not accepting what's happening. Like if we're upset about something, that's legit, right? But then we can do something, and you happen to have the tools to change it and to prove to yourself not only could you go from neutral, but you could actually be at more than 100%.
it was pretty interesting. It became really clear to me at that time that I didn't really all I did was focus on the details of practice, regulating the breathing, coordinating the breathing with my movements, regulating my mechanics and my body structure, and intent on the martial techniques. And that's it. I didn't think about the topic or subject matter. I just left it alone and focused on my practice, and it changed everything. And so I realized that sometimes we have things that we might have emotional issues or things inside of us that we can't necessarily approach directly or know how to approach directly, but through these kind of trainings, you can deal with them from another side completely that can reach them and open them up and release those things. And I thought that was very awesome.
So, what do you think? Because sometimes when we have overwhelming and overpowering grief or
Hmm.
anger, and it just sometimes just sideswipes us, whether it's a sudden event or it's a reoccurring event from the past that just keeps replaying rather in our minds, but it becomes so overwhelming. And even when it isn't overwhelming, what do you think it is that it takes to just do something so simple? It seems like it's a huge chasm to go, I'm just going to focus on the breath. Do you think some people just think it won't work, so why should I try?
Most people don't really know that there's such things that can help like that. And they might not even be aware that there's anything they could do at that time. 'Cause when things are very powerful and overwhelming, you have to understand I think the negative effects of acting out on those feelings, and know that that's not the right direction. And then if you have some tools at your disposal, like I have Tai Chi practice in particular, I know that that manages emotions, that it gives me some expression of all the energy that's inside of me. Uh, and even getting out in nature will help recycle all your energy as well. Understanding those things, you have some options, and you can say, I know acting out on these feelings are not going to lead to anything positive, maybe even far worse than positive, but if I go do this thing, at least I won't be doing anything negative, and something positive will come out of that.
So it's trusting that. I don't know if we see enough models of that sort of behavior to trust that, yeah, you know what, that's another way, and that does work. And it will actually produce better results, right?
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
So I've got a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Does someone, maybe also too, another possibility that people put off doing something like this is they say, either I can't do it, I'm not, it's too advanced for me, or it takes too long. Like I don't have time in my day to do it. What would you
Hmm.
say to that?
Usually for my adult students and senior, I teach all different age groups, but for the adults and seniors, they usually come out of a need of some sort, maybe for health and wellness or to combat stress. As you know how much of a killer stress is, we go through stress every single day, and we get used to it, so we don't even think about it. But it's still happening, and when you get stressed, the neck muscles tighten up, which controls blood flow to the brain. The chest muscles tighten up, that's blood flow to the heart. The abdominal muscles tighten up, that's blood flow to the digestive system. So prolonged stress over a long time really will kill a person. So what I found in the Tai Chi practice is every day practicing breaks down the stress that you experience every day. And possibly the philosophy of the practice will make your mental process such that things don't stress you as much. But so to break it down every day allows it not to the effects of stress to build up, you know.
So do you think it's possible to show something in 5 minutes or less that
Yeah,
someone could do? Yeah, I would love
yeah.
to see.
Usually
Could you do an example of it?
oh yeah, usually I can do like I teach sitting meditation and
Okay.
standing meditation first.
Okay. What do you want to show today?
You can show the breathing. This you
Okay.
can do in the seated posture.
Okay.
You can sit in a chair or you can sit in the legs crossed position, whichever is most comfortable.
Okay.
You can place your hands in your lap, on your knees, or you can even place some palms up on your knees, whichever feels most comfortable. Generally, we tend to join the hands together because it promotes a circulation, a chain of circulation, linked at the hands.
Okay.
Um, you can rest one palm inside the other, thumbs touching together, and that's fine. Tai Chi doesn't have a specific hand posture that's necessary, but I fluctuate between what my teacher liked to meditate with his palms up on his knees, just resting on his knees. But I like more so to link my hands together, so I do that more often. I like the circuit of energy that develops from having the hands linked together. Um, so the very first thing is learning how to control the breath. And so there's a breathing method we call reverse breathing, or they call it Taoist breathing or embryonic breathing. And what it is essentially is you breathe in through the nose and you pull your lower abdomen in towards the spine. And as you exhale, you let the lower abdomen relax in and out through the nose. And so this breathing, you want it soft and slow, very thin thread of air, and almost pretty subtle on the inhalation. Exhalation can be a little bit more coarse, but it's still a slow and soft breath. So right at this point, we're making the breath more subtle. So inhalation, the lower abdomen pulls in towards the spine. Exhalation, you let the lower abdomen naturally relax. As you're doing this breathing, you want to make sure that the chest stays relaxed. And you can do that by using the diaphragm. When you pull the lower abdomen in, the diaphragm will expand, and that will allow the chest to stay relaxed, so you won't have any chest breathing or anything like that. You want to keep that relaxed so that the heart stays relaxed. And also, this kind of breathing fills the lungs from the bottom up. You know, the lungs are bigger at the bottom and smaller at the top. So we want to use the bigger part at the bottom and fill that up. So we breathe using the lower abdomen and the diaphragm. Inhaling, lower abdomen pulls into the spine, diaphragm expands. When it's full, you exhale and relax. As you're exhaling, the mind focuses to the lower abdomen, to the dantian, as I mentioned before, which is 4 finger widths below the navel and midway inside the torso. So you want to keep the mind focused to there. So your mind will be partly focused on the dantian, especially at the exhalation. That's the most important part for your mind, important time for your mind to focus at the lower abdomen or the dantian. And that's going to put your intention there, and your energy follows your intent. So wherever you put your mind at, that's where your energy goes. So in this case, we're putting our mind at the dantian or the lower energy field or lower energy center. And because we put our intent there, the energy goes there. And as you practice more and more, you start to feel maybe it warms up or cools down or vibrates. Different things may happen. When they do, don't get distracted by it. Just keep doing the breathing that made it happen, and just be observant without getting distracted by any sensations that may come up. Don't expect any sensations, just be aware, you know, so the mind doesn't get in the way of what you're trying to accomplish, you know. But so this breathing, okay.
This is wonderful, Asr. This is really wonderful. I remember when we met and I asked you, you know, can you show me some things? And you showed me this foundational practice. It was actually hard for me because it's the opposite, right? Sometimes your belly goes out when you inhale, and then it goes. So to do this reverse sort of breathing it helps to occupy my busy mind because it gives me something to focus on. And like you said, where the mind goes, energy flows, right? So I'm like, okay, I can focus on that, and then I can feel things moving. This is a great foundational practice. I think that almost anybody can use, right? And to get you into this more balanced, equalized state, and then you can kind of go from there, right? So
Yes.
this is wonderful. I think we're going to need to do a part 2 because you just have so much information, and we didn't even get into the standing routines. But I really think this breathing and the basics, I think it'll be really helpful for people, and I look forward to people's comments. So thank you so much for joining us today, Asr, and we'll do part 2 sometime soon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us at A Time for Wellness. And until we see each other in person, happy trails and make time for wellness.